David Littleproud, welcome to the program.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So what do you think? Will you try to win back Barnaby Joyce, or is it good riddance?
Oh, look, obviously he hasn't joined One Nation. It's disappointing that he's broken a contract with the National Party, and while he didn't sit in the National Party room for the last 4 or 5 weeks, that's not something that's unusual. We've had other members that have done that, but the fact that he's taken a significant step to walk away from the membership, from the people who put him there, that invested their time for no financial gain, but their belief in our movement. And our movement is bigger than any individual. It's about the collective and about those that those members that have put us there. So look, Barnaby hasn't joined One Nation, but he's made a significant step, and my door's always open, phone's always on. I have no animosity towards Barnaby Joyce. I never have. The reality is he's made a decision after the fact that I challenged him after the 22 elections, as did Darren Chester. I won. I kept him on the front bench and made it clear after the 25 election that there were others that needed to step up and to give opportunity, like Ross Cadell, who's done a fantastic job in helping Matt Canavan land our emissions policy and be able to make sure that we have a future for the party. And that hasn't sat well with Barnaby. I accept that, but unfortunately, when you're leader, as he did, you have to make tough decisions about who's in the team. But we can all still make a contribution when you're in the team. And I think if you look at what we've done for the last 3.5 years, what we have achieved, we've set the national agenda on the voice, on nuclear energy, on divestiture, and now on emissions policies. And, you know, obviously we lost Andrew G because of our position on the voice, and Jacinta Price left because of ambition. She wants to be Prime Minister. I can never be Prime Minister. That sits with me, but what I sit with is the ability to be able to influence policy at a national level and through the coalition. I think, as one of your commentators said to me recently, it probably hasn't been since the McEwen era that we've seen a more influential national party in the national stage, but also in setting coalition policy, and I'm proud of the team that's achieved that.
All right, well, just on the point you make that he's broken a contract. I mean, he was elected 7 months ago as a Nationals MP for New England. He's now not going to sit as a Nationals MP. Should he quit the parliament so that there can be a by-election there?
Well, I mean, obviously that's a decision for Barnaby Joyce to make, and he needs to reflect on the decision he's... Well, I mean, obviously we want to make sure that the people in New England are represented with the contract that they signed up to. But ultimately,
which was for a Nationals MP, right? So should he go so that there can be another Nationals MP?
Well, that's a decision under the law for Barnaby Joyce to make, not for me to make. Right. My job is to focus on the future and to continue to articulate what our party has achieved, and whether that be through the voice right through to emissions policies, something that Barnaby himself was very passionate about.
So you'll leave it to him as to whether he should quit the parliament between now and the election. In the Labor Party, if you do this, you're labelled a rat. Is Barnaby Joyce a rat from your perspective?
Oh, look, I don't think commentary from the sideline helps anybody. I'm focused on moving forward as a party room and continue to build on the wins that we've created. Yeah. I think that's what the Australian people expect. They expect a level of leadership and maturity from their politicians that I don't think we've seen for some time, and I don't intend to get into that. I intend to focus on continuing to make sure we shape coalition policy. And I'd rather be able to focus and draw the collective wisdom of my party room to continue to lead this country and the debate in this country. That's what we've shown. The level of maturity and leadership I don't think we've seen from too many others. And I've seen that the Labor Party, when they lost the senator recently, they were pretty vicious. I'll let the Australian people make up their mind, and normally they don't like people who leave a party and go to another one, but that's the beauty of our democracy, David.
It sounds
Ultimately,
to me,
there's a judgment, and the Australian people get...
It sounds to me, listening to you this morning, that you're not, taking the gloves off when it comes to Barnaby Joyce. You're not saying he should quit the parliament. You're not, using names about whether you call him a rat or whatever. Are you worried about the threat he may pose should he go to One Nation?
You never take anything for granted in politics, David, but I think the Nationals and our polling shows this. the Nationals are holding up very strong in terms of our votes since the election because we've taken the time to get policy right. We could have taken the populist path and just said no to net zero, but we had to say why we were saying no and what we were going to. And I think we've landed an eminently sensible policy of a cheaper, better, fairer way to reduce emissions than Labor's $9 trillion net zero plan. I think we've shown eminent sense in how we get to that point. And I think that's what the Australian people are listening to, is the common sense that the Nationals take to Canberra.
I don't want to get bogged down on the net zero thing, but because you keep mentioning this $9 trillion plan, I do need to point out that figure, which, as you know, comes from the Net Zero Australia project. They have said it's a misrepresentation. The more accurate figure, they say, is $300 billion. In fact, they say we expect small impacts on average household energy costs, maybe even small reductions if you include car ownership, a finding that should temper some of the fear-mongering. Do you need to stop using that $9 trillion figure now?
No, David, because if you do go into their comments and you look at it and what they do say is that number is what will need to be invested. And while the $300 billion might come directly from Australian taxpayers, there will be a lot of foreign investment that will be required. Now, David, I don't know whether you live in some magical land in Australia that thinks that someone's going to spend $9 trillion and not expect that money back nor a return on that investment. That goes through the economy, from energy right through to transport, all the way through.
Yeah,
so that is a cost.
They've said the $9 trillion includes, as you say, foreign investment in getting things like the green hydrogen industry off the ground. No, but they've said that $9 trillion includes foreign investors building, green hydrogen export facilities in Australia, things that may not happen now.
Someone's always got to pay, David.
Yeah, okay.
Someone's always got to pay, David. I don't know what magical land you live in, but Australia's no different to anyone else. If you can find someone that can drop a lazy trillion into Maranoa, I'll take it.
Just trying to stick to the facts.
Just trying to have to get a return.
Make sure the viewers are aware that the people who said that $9 trillion say it's a big misrepresentation and it shouldn't be used. But anyway, let's come back to One Nation.
No, well, it's not a misrepresentation.
Well, that's what they say.
It's not a misrepresentation.
Okay, that's what they say, the authors of that number. Let's turn to immigration. One Nation wants to cap net overseas migration at 130,000 places a year. Do you think that's a good idea?
Well, we'll get to our number and we're working through that again. You can go for the headlines or you can take the time, 2.5 years before an election, to get the policy right. What we want to do is have a migration policy that works for Australia. We're giving the greatest gift we can give to any person on this planet, a ticket to Australia. What we've seen over the last 3.5 years is a government that's prioritised dog groomers and martial arts instructors instead of prioritising some builders, electricians, plumbers, roofers, tilers that might be able to help in our supply. We need to make sure we get a migration policy that slows down to buy some time to allow building some homes and to have the skills to be able to do that. And I think this is the opportunity that's been lost where we have to make some tough decisions, and we'll have to recast that in making sure that we do have a very close lens on the skills that we need, and particularly in regional Australia, David, I've got to say, out here we're still looking for skilled labour. We still need those skills to come in. We had the ag visa ripped away from us by the Albanese government, but it's broader than that, and that's why we need to make sure we have a migration policy that determines who comes to this country, how many we have, what skills they have, and where we want them to live.
Do you want more migrants in regional Australia?
Well, in parts, David, there is a skill shortage, and this is where when you are giving the greatest ticket you can give to anyone on this planet, why wouldn't you pull the levers that don't cost the Australian taxpayer anything to make sure that you're bringing them with the visa settings that ensure that they come and live and bring their skills to the areas where we need them. And then, to give you a perfect example of that, that's what the ag visa was about, David. They could come work in agriculture for 4 or 5 years. Once they laid down roots, then they could have their pathway to permanent residency. That's about bringing the next generation of migrants to Australia, and particularly regional Australia, to build regional Australia. But when you can do that and pull the right levers, you can do that without costing the taxpayer anything, and that's where some common sense needs to prevail. So
will that be part of the coalition's...
you'll see from us.
Yeah, will that be part of the coalition's policy? Bring back the agriculture visa, bring more migrants through that to regional Australia?
Well, it's broader than the ag visa, David. Just understand that where we need doctors, we need nurses and physios right through to town planners across much of regional Australia, and that's why this rich tapestry of immigration and where it goes is one that it's important that you just don't.
So how do you do that? How do you get
numbers.
how do you get doctors and town planners into regional Australia?
Well, that's about saying to them, you can come over on your visa and living in a particular area, invest in it. We do that already, David, under the meat workers agreements, where we can bring them in. I've got about 160 Vietnamese in Charleville, and they are model citizens living out there. They're the first to work, they're the first to church on Sunday, they're not hanging out of the pubs causing fights on a Friday night, and their kids are the captains and the duxes of the school, and they're revered Australian, or hopefully new Australians that have laid down roots there. So there are already existing levers you can pull, and I think that's where you have to look at the complexity of this and the problems we're trying to solve. But just pouring people broadly into Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane, you're living with that experience, and your children are losing hope. And this is where we need to let state and local governments build supply and get supply back in as quickly as we can. And that means the lever that the federal government can pull the most is, in fact, on migration and how we do it and who we bring in.
What do you think about this idea of some sort of values test for people who are coming on temporary visas? There's already the citizenship test for people who want to become citizens, but if you're coming on a temporary visa, on any of these visas you're talking about, do you think there should be some sort of values test? Is that a problem at the moment?
I don't think it hurts. I think it actually adds to the value and demonstrates the value of citizenship in this country and what our forefathers have built, the values and principles of freedom of speech. But with that comes a responsibility. And when you've seen the discord on the streets, particularly of Sydney and Melbourne, over the last two years since October 2023, I mean, I think there is a risk that we as Australians can't import the hate that permeates in some other parts of the world. And I think it's important we make sure that when we do bring people from those challenged parts of the world, that they understand they're coming here with a responsibility to live up to the values and principles that our great country has been built on, which is migration, but how we have come together to be able to achieve a harmonious society for most of it, and not allow that hate that permeates in some parts of the world to be imported in. And I think that's about setting the standards, making sure those standards are fully made aware to those that want to come to this country. I think that's what most Australians expect their government to set those standards to those that are bringing in, to make sure we can enjoy what we've got and not erode what we've got.
I want to ask you about the environment law changes that passed through the Parliament during the week, particularly the impact on farmers there in Queensland. Land clearing within 50 metres of a Great Barrier Reef catchment will no longer be exempt from the federal law. Farmers, in other words, will now need to have approval for land clearing in these areas. Do you have a problem with that?
Well, they already do, David, and this is a cheap political point-scoring exercise by Murray Watt and the government to try and demonise farmers, to make it sound as though they're out there clearing land every day. It is illegal to clear native vegetation in any state and territory in this country. In fact, that's how we met our Kyoto Protocol targets. Vegetation management laws were put in every state. So farmers don't go and undertake tree clearing. The only tree clearing that's reported now is the management of the regrowth of the areas that they're allowed to farm. And so I think it's important that the Australian public understand farmers are being demonised here. They are the best stewards of our environment. I used to be a rural banker doing cash flows around farmers' tables, mate. I can tell you, after you've done the budget, you drive around the Hilux, you could see who was flogging their country and who wasn't, and whether the budgets were going to work. They know that the health of the environment of what they manage is intrinsically tied to their profit and loss. And I just think Murray Watt has taken a step too far here in demonising farms and try to say to the rest of the Australian people that farmers are out there clearing timber every day. For someone that used to be an ag minister and is now the environment minister, it's abhorrent.
Well, just on the point you make, I mean, there's the change on catchments in relation to the Great Barrier Reef, but then nationally the other change in this law on regrowth, which you mentioned, you can no longer just clear that regrowth if it's 15 years old or older. You obviously have a big problem with this. Would you seek to repeal those changes?
Yeah, and obviously you've got to get a Senate that'll work with you, but there are a number of these changes within the law and also in forestry area as well. All we're going to do is to say we can put our head in a pillow at night, close our eyes and think, oh, well, it's okay, we'll import timber from Indonesia and other parts of the world that don't have our environmental standards. We take 1 in 14,000 trees in a native forest. It's sustainably managed, and we're going to say, well, it's okay, go and burn up Indonesia and just so we can have timber for our houses here. You've got to understand it's a bigger world, more complex.
But in terms of Australia, I mean, the State of Environment report does say land clearing is a major threat to endangered species. You don't accept that?
No, David. I think what you'll find, particularly where I live, I've got the lived experience. Out here, there's no one tearing up the vegetation recklessly. They're managing regrowth so that they can produce your food and fibre, so that you don't have a cost of living crisis. In fact, when I was in government as the Ag Minister, I introduced a biodiversity program that rewarded them not just for abating carbon but for improving biodiversity. And all this government's trying to do is this reckless race to try and achieve emissions reductions because they know that they're falling desperately short, and they're going to do it at anyone's expense, and that's ultimately going to come back to the checkout. It's going to come back to your cost, but we're locking up farmers. We've already lost 7.2 million hectares, and we're going to lose another 5.1 million hectares of arable agricultural land because of this reckless race to what the government wants to achieve in emissions reductions.
Finally, David Littleproud, the Prime Ministerial wedding. You and the PM, despite your political differences, actually get on. Do you have any well wishes for the happy couple?
Yeah, I'm genuinely happy for him. It's great to see, and it's great to see the PM's got someone that loves him and is going to be with him. It's a tough job and it's a lonely job, let alone being Prime Minister. So I couldn't be happier for the PM and Jodie. And I've got to say, Jodie has already stepped up on the international stage and represented us in such a classy way for some time. And now they've solidified their partnership with marriage, and I think good on him. I hope he has a bit of a break now. I think we all need a break, but good on him, and I wish him every happiness. I couldn't be happier for the pair of them.
Touching note to finish on. David Littleproud, thanks so much for joining us this morning.